Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. My name is Utsibe Eno Ekuk, and yes, this is another session of the Sola Abulu and Associates training session. And this month, this time, we're actually focusing on the topic on packing the theory and practice of strategic communications. It is such a delight to bring this session to you, and like I said, I'm Tibeno Epuk, and I have my amiable guest and host, Mrs. Sola Abulu, who is, a communications consultant based in Nigeria and founder of Sola Abulu and Associates, a training and consultancy firm. So yes, so glad to have you, ma'am. Good afternoon. All right, so
Good afternoon.
this is going to be okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. This is going to be a very interactive session, and if you're joining us, just be rest assured that we'll take your questions. We would love to entertain your questions as much as they can come, and we'll be discussing unpacking the theory and practice of strategic communications. As you can see, we want to realize, what it is to be what strategic communications mean. Is it a theory? Is it what I mean? Who can practice strategic communications? This is for you. So this session I'd like to kindly advise that you share this with your network, with your contacts, those around, those who you think that should be on this session, business leaders, executives, those in the communications practice. They need to watch this. So we're just going to start right about now, and not to forget, please, share questions with us as they come in. Glad to have you again, ma'am. So, all right. So we'll begin. SA would really like, as we always do, what is strategic communications? We always like to begin with definitions, not making any assumptions that anybody who is watching us now understands the what we're discussing. So this is going to be a guide to everyone who joins us and who would watch the replay of this video. So what is strategic communications, and how is it different from public relations?
So thanks, Tibeno, and welcome everybody to this session again. Thanks for being here. I hope you can hear me very well. Give me a thumbs up, and Tibeno has said this is going to be very interactive. So let me just know if you're hearing. Let's see your comments. I want to see some comments in the chat. If you're here, just say hello. Let's know what part of the world that you're connecting us you're connecting with us from. So yes, like you said, we start off with definition. So what is strategic communication? Actually, I did a little bit of research, although I've known this for quite a while. But in around 2007, some scholars came up with a definition which has become the template for the practice of strategic communications as a whole by Hallahan and about four others as well. And they define strategic communications as the purposeful communication by an organization to fulfill its mission. So either the purposeful use of communication, that's how they define strategic communication. In fact, the paper they wrote is on the internet in case you're interested. And what they were talking about a phenomenon that was arising as of the time, saying that there was a need for organizations to become more intentional about how they communicate and to use all the kind of theories that exist in that space to carve out a intentional way of communicating in pursuit of their objectives. Now, it was a big departure or a significant change from what had existed before, which is public relations, which is more about managing relationships between stakeholders. And I, for one, I always try to make that distinction. And that's why we're starting this conversation today. Oh, thank you, Nana. Welcome from Accra. Thank you. Lovely to see you. Happy. Oh, lovely. Yeah, we're really glad to have you here. So, so it was a big departure from the public relations practice, and it was significant enough for them to have this session at the International Communications Conference of America, or something. It was held in America. International Communications Association was held in America 2007, and they were discussing futuristically how this practice of strategic communication is emerging, first in the organization space, corporate business space, and how it was very different from PR. And I'm hoping that today, in today's session, we will be able to touch on why these differences exist. And for us as practitioners, whoever, business leaders, whatever it is that we are, we understand that difference, because to be honest, I know that a lot of business people are confused about the difference. Politically, I can also tell that political leaders are confused because people just don't know that PR is different from communications and how it's different. So that's where we are. There's some interconnections, there's some things that are common, but to be honest, there are two practice areas that have some areas of synergy. And I'm hoping that today we'll talk a little bit about that. So Tum, welcome to from Accra, Ghana. Wow, Accra, Ghana is really representing today. Other African countries, you better show your show your credentials in the chat. Otherwise, we're giving it to Ghana. Welcome. Lovely to have you. Back to you, Tibe.
All right, thank you so much, SA, for that definition. It really covered, the difference between strategic communications and public relations. And yes, thank you to everyone who is joining us. Please keep the comments coming. Let us know where you're joining us from. We see you, and we're glad to have you in this session. So, I'll just go to the next question. So, why should any business or organization, care about strategic communications? Is it just a fancy trend? Is there an actual profession or a practice area? I mean, why I'm a business owner, for example, and then why do I need strategic communications to grow my business?
Good one. Good question. I think the very short answer to this is that any business or organizational leader, you cannot afford to ignore strategic communication now because it is the key to internal coherence and external effectiveness. It is so, what am I saying here? It is the key to making you work well as an organization internally, be coherent amongst yourself, particularly if you're a big organization, even if you're a small one to a very large extent. But if you're a big organization, you have people working in different places. Strategic communication is the key, first of all, to making you coherent as an organization, working in a unified way towards one goal. And then to now be effective externally in terms of how you engage with stakeholders, how you relate with your investors, how you promote your brand, how you are visible, the reputation that you have, how you manage your regulator relationships, stakeholder, how people see you outside. And that's what, and like I said, again, this brings again the distinction between PR and strategic communications, because PR is never internal. PR does not have an internal face. PR is 100% external. The only thing that PR will do internally is to get the picture of, okay, this is what we want to share outside. This is who we are, get all that strategy from inside and go outside. But strategic communication has an internal piece. There's a whole world of organizational effectiveness that a lot of people are not aware of, and they're not playing in. My observation has been that it is the multinational corporations that understand this, and they use it effectively. They use it for so many areas, and I don't want to go into that yet because I hope along the line we'll talk a bit about that. But there is so much. In fact, for many, I will say this so that I don't forget. For many comms professionals, particularly if you are somebody, you are here, you are working in a corporate organization, and your title is corporate comms. If you are someone that you are still struggling for a seat at the table, the problem is that you have not started using communications as an enabler of change, of transformation, and of business delivery in the organization. You are not using communications the way it was intended. In fact, when the Hallahan and Co. wrote their paper in 2007 about strategic communication, it was focused 100% on organizational communication. Even though they referenced the external pieces like marketing and brand, it was in passing. They were talking more about the opportunities that exist for organizations to transform themselves by communication, through communication, with communication, purposefully. So that's one of the messages. The reason why we're having this course today, let me just say why we're having this training today, is because there are two things. First of all, we want to shed light on the theory of strategic comms and let you know that we have a lot of people who are working based on practice and I have done this, I have done that. If you do not get the theoretical knowledge, you'll be limited. I'm telling you, you'll be completely limited. Don't tell me. I've had people say, oh, I got it by chance. There's nothing like that. Have you ever seen anybody go to medical school without whatever? You can have intuition for that. No, it's not possible. At best, you will be limited to certain sections. And do you know what will expose you? Crisis management. Issues management will expose you. Or change management. You cannot do change management if you don't understand the concept of communication, the theory. You can't. You can't work across sectors if you don't understand the principles and the frameworks. So what I want to get across to everyone here is that there is a theory of strategic communication. And then there's the practice. Don't situate yourself 100% in the practice, because the practice is like you are putting the cart before the horse and you are relying on only what gets into your head and what you can learn by doing. But there are things that you have to learn by being taught. So back
Thank you
to
so
you.
much, FA. So this really, I mean, your last statement really gave is really introducing. It's very introductory for the next question I'm going to ask, which is, is strategic communications a theory or a practice? You clearly said that it's a theory and it's a practice. So what makes it one or the other? And then what is the theory of strategic communication? But just before you answer this, please, I just want to reiterate that for as many of you as are joining us from wherever, all over different African countries and the world, please feel free to drop your questions in the comment sections as they come, and your contributions. We are very attentive and we'll take them as they come. So please, what's the theory and what's the practice of strategic communications, and what makes it one or the other? Thank you so much.
Thank you for that lovely question. And I like this that we're framing. I'm just hoping that I can really get around all of it within the time that we have. Okay, so the theory, first of all, yes, it is a theory and it is a practice. Many people are only aware of the practice of it, those that are, but there's actually a theory, and it's actually called the strategic management of communication. Now, again, I had mentioned Hallahan and the others who started this body of thinking in 2007. What it is about, how it started off as a field, a communication, or rather an investigation into the ways in which organizations can inject predictability into how they manage their relationships. And that phenomenon was already emerging because they were beginning to see that a lot of the big players, the big companies, the Coca-Colas, the rest of them, were very intentional about how they communicate, and they were getting results based on it. And of course, as the internet began to come out and opportunities for engagement, people became more connected, people became more aware. There were many voices out there. Organizational leaders, particularly the bigger ones, the multinationals, they began to find that it was necessary. This is not optional. It's not like, oh, I like. It became a business imperative for them to begin to develop communication. So people started studying what was going on and beginning to, build principles and concepts based on it. So strategic communications theory, and like I said, if you do a master's or you go into, like an international organization, international university or something, they will teach you some of these theories. It brings a lot of fields together. So this is why I say it's not something you can just as in wing on your back. Somebody must be teaching you either formally or informally, because it brings together a lot of things, fields of existing social science fields. For instance, the theory of strategic communications, first of all, relies on systems theory. Systems theory says that the sum of the parts of something, or the whole of something, is bigger and greater than the sum of the parts. In other words, systems theory says that we put many things together. It is the way we bring many components together and mix it to bring out something new that then enables us to achieve our outcomes, is what makes us achieve success. That those individual things on their own is not what brings us success. But our knowledge of what those individual ingredients or component parts can do, when they come together in a particular way, sequence and mix, is what can help us create our outcomes. It relies on that. It relies on stakeholder management theory, which says for you to engage stakeholders effectively, you must know where they are coming from, because everybody has their rational beliefs, their mindset, the attitudes, the things that drive how they think and their perspective, and that people can only receive information that they can process, that they can relate to, that they are willing to act on. So it also relies on ethics and says, okay, even though you have the ability to communicate and influence through communications, what are the guardrails? Does that then mean I should do it anyhow? Does that mean I can lie? You know what I'm saying? It relies on a whole body of knowledge. There are about 6 different fields of social science, social and behavioral sciences, on which the theory, the strategic management of communication theory, or the strategic communication theory, rests upon. So when you are doing strategic communications theory, or when you are learning it, you are bringing together all of those thinking. And this is important because there is a sequence to communication, to strategic communication, very much, which is what systems theory is about. Systems theory says, for instance, is like baking a cake. I want to bake a cake. There are several ingredients in the cake, but the flour alone will not give me a cake. The flour and the baking powder alone cannot give me the cake. Even all of the ingredients put in a rubbish way cannot give me the kind of cake. There's a different way to do a sponge cake. There's a different way to do a different, the hardcore, the other hard Nigerian cake that we do. They all have different ways. The fluffy ones, the soft ones, the more creamy ones. There's different kinds of ways. But it's the way in which the number of the ingredients, the sequence of the placing, that then determines the kind of cake you end up with. That is how strategic communications is. And you start from the beginning to the end. There is a process. But if you don't even know what that process is, it's not possible for you to implement it. So that's the theory. What was the second question that you asked me?
What's the practice?
Okay, then the practice. Then the practice is when you now begin to put that into place. I don't know. I think one of your next questions asked me about elements. Should I start talking about the elements now? Or I think there's a point at which you're going to ask me about that. But that's how it is. So there's a theory. And like for somebody like me, because I have that theory, that framework is firmly inside of me. It's a part of me now. I have learned it. I have lived it. And let me say this. I had to be taught the theory of strategic communication. I worked in a multinational. I did not learn it. So whenever I see people telling me, oh, I picked it up, I have a flair. I hate it when I hear people say I have a flair for communication, because I'm like, and so? Because most of the time, they're talking about, I speak at events,
that's really interesting.
Do you understand? And that is, not understanding that is why we mishire. We see this in the political setting, where a lot of people who know nothing about communications are managing communications on behalf of the government of the federation. They don't even know the principles. And you have to start from the audience. What do you want to achieve? There's a whole process. Let me not get ahead of myself. So let me go back to you on that. So I hope so the practice is how you actually implement that, and then in real ways, and then you learn. The practice is important because, again, there are many things that you learn as you begin to do, you begin to apply. For me, when I came out from my 9-to-5 work, I had done that for about 22 years in a multinational firm. And like I said, I had done PR for like 10, 15 years before they sat us down. They huddled us in a room. We were members of a global company. The global team came to teach us the principles of strategic communication. We had been doing PR for over 10, 15 years before they sat us down. Then you are telling, and we're doing. Oh, let me not talk. I don't want to say. Do you understand what I'm saying? I had to learn it. I had to learn it. So don't even come and with all this winging nonsense that people are doing. So if you want to not learn, be intentional about the fact that you don't want to learn it. But don't think you are deceiving anybody. Like when I tell someone, if I'm sometimes I'm called into panels to help with interviewing certain people. It happened in my previous life. It also happens sometimes now. You cannot. In fact, the worst thing is for you to have me on. I pray that I never am on a panel that you are on, because you can't deceive me. Do you understand? Because if you don't know the frameworks, you will not have the language. You won't have the language. Do you understand? You can't bamboozle your way out of it. So it's for me. It's really about how far do you want to go in this profession. Do you want to be able to practice? Some of us, I know, we're in Africa, we're planning to operate in Canada or other places of the world. Do you want to be able to practice comms in Canada? Because in Canada, nobody's winging anything. You're dealing with people who deal with data, who deal with science, who know that you have to map an audience before you are talking to them. They don't go based on intuition or, because I read something on social media. No, they will ask you, what's the data? I remember when I worked in the UK for a year, and I had a feeling about something. And I said, I think we should do this. And they were like, Sola, where's the data? And they were like, Sola. And they were like, and they were not going to move an inch without me getting the data to support the hypothesis I was putting forward. So we had to go out and get the data. And the data got so good, supported the data, the hypothesis to a very large extent. But that's how it's done internationally. It is a science. You understand what I'm saying? It is not based on intuition. It's not based on practice alone. Nobody cares how, or you have done this. Nobody cares. They want to know because they're not going to invest in something that they're not sure is going to deliver the result. So you have to put in the communication strategy that you will build for them, has to put all those building blocks to place. So let me go back to you so that we can begin to run through what that
Okay.
strategy would look
Thank you
like
so
practically.
much. I mean, we're just getting started, and we're already unpacking a whole lot of the science and strategic communication. So this just brings me to my next question, which is how does strategic management of communications work? Is it focused based on internal audience alone, or does it focus on external audience too?
Yeah, thanks. I think I've addressed that earlier. It's focused on both, and like I said again, this is why it is not PR. It is not PR because PR is 100% externally focused. And I want to say this: there are a lot of comms teams or external affairs teams or corporate affairs teams who are built up of people who are PR people and comms people. And PR people are very useful. We need them for media relations, we need them for government relations, investor relations, and all of that. But what I would say to people is that, and this I observed in my working life in my 9 to 5, if you are not a comms person, you should not be on a comms role. If you know that you prefer doing those relationship management things, events, campaigns, engaging people in their offices and all that, please stay away from the comms jobs. And I think the comms leaders too need to recognize in their teams the people who are more for that outward facing relationship based practice areas. Because the comms people, you are thinkers, you are strategy implementers, you are problem solvers, you are people who can sit down, go through data and come up with strategy and write things down. If you don't like that kind of research based practice, you do not belong in comms. So yes, it is focused on the internal, it's focused on the internal, it's more about the organizational change, business communications, leadership communications, productivity, compliance, getting the organization, and then culture. I think to a very large extent, even in this part of the world, I think we have not explored the opportunity of using communications as an instrument of culture change. We allow organizations to develop anyhow kind of culture. Multinationals don't behave this way, and there's a reason they are global brands. They don't behave this way. They are intentional about the culture that they want to breed, which is why when you see people that work in those organizations, they are like clones of one another. It's not by chance. From the day you enter indoctrination, as I was saying, they are building their culture into you. But what do we see in other in non-multinational companies? Many, every anything goes. In fact, the culture is so cycled. If you go into one department, there's one culture there. You go to another department, there's another culture there. Because there's
Yeah.
nobody exactly, and it's chaotic. It's chaotic. So no matter how efficient you are, that is why you will never be a global company. Do you understand what I'm saying? You will be a local
Yeah.
champion, a big fish in a very small pond. So next question, please.
Okay, so I mean, so this question really goes to everything you have said, which is strategic communications, focused on only business and corporate entities alone, or does it have a place with, in the organizational context? How does it work in the organizational context?
So it actually has a place in the organization, not just in business, like I've talked about. And in the organizational context, there are many ways. There is team building, there is performance, there is culture, there is work behaviors, collaboration, efficiency, productivity, and loyalty. I mean, sometimes when I hear corporate comms people say, they struggle to build an internal communications plan, I'm like, in fact, sometimes I wonder, honestly, if there's anybody on the call and you are working in an organization, you are struggling with your internal comms, we need to have a conversation. Because for me, internal communications, oh my goodness, it is such an open, it's a blue ocean space. There is so much you can do. But people, I think there's this postmaster mentality approach of doing it where they say leadership wants to give a message. Be intentional. For instance, think about what the business is trying to achieve at a particular time. What is it that they are struggling with? What are the behaviors we want to nurture? What is it that if we measure, we will know that people have moved from point A to B? Go to the business leaders, have conversations around areas in which they are struggling. Then look for the communications opportunities in those things, and then build an internal communications campaign to those people, the group, whether it is a department or a unit, around that. And then see how the behaviors change. Again, you cannot do it now when you don't have no framework. How can you do it? You cannot. You can't. And that's why many of you, your internal communication strategy is zero, zilch. All you do is organize town hall. People come and they sit down. They do. You understand? Very textbook. You
Yeah.
cannot become an agent for change. Whereas that is what internal communications is. I'm telling you, if the way internal ICU operates in multinationals, and I want feedback on some of you that are listening, if you work in those organizations where internal communications is used as a strategic driver, please share your experiences so that they can know that it's not just Sola Abulu pulling these things out of her hair. So it can make the difference between an organization that productivity is lagging, because if productivity is lagging, if you applied strategic communication strategy, you will go and get the data for why is productivity lagging. It's about people now. What's going on with the people? Is there a problem? Is it a people issue? Is it a leadership issue? Is it a process issue? Most of the time is because there's a disconnect between one level of the organization and another level of the organization. But your data, your research or audit or whatever it is that you do, will get that feedback for you. And then you provide the connect, put in a process where information gets to the people where it should, leadership steps up to the game. You can actually put it in a plan and a strategy. Again, like I said, you cannot do it if you do not understand the theory of communication. So I think that is why a lot of people stay in the external communication space, because in the external communication space they can come back with it's difficult to measure success. You can you can be saying all of that, whatever. But in the internal communication space, it's very if people will know that if it's not impacting productivity, transformation, safety, compliance,
Measurable.
work behaviors, is glaring. But then for me, where you will get the trust and the respect of your leaders is when you use strategy, you learn how to use strategic communications to make the organization more effective. That is the fundamental role of strategic communications, but you cannot do it because you do not know the theory. I hope
Thank
I've
you
answered
so
that a
much.
little bit.
Yes, you have. Thank you so much, SA. And we are dragging all of you who are on this session currently. Lizzie from Abuja, and Nuruddin from Lagos, and then the rest of you from Ghana, and those of you who are, anonymously attending this session. Please share your feedback with us. Please share, your experiences and of course questions. Like we said at the beginning of the session, it is a very interesting, interactive session. And whenever we have an opportunity like this to host the veteran herself, we like to make very good use of the opportunity. And so I implore you again, once again, to share your opportunity, your questions and feedback with us, and we'll be glad to take them. Just share them in the comment section, and we'll be glad to take them. So, SA, I want you to walk us through the elements of strategic communications in a business context. So we're going to the practice area of strategic communications now. So what is real life strategic communications like? Just walk us through, the elements of strategic communications in a business context.
Okay, yeah. So, and again, as everybody can see on the screen, we have a course coming up on September 26th where we go into this in depth. But I know that not everybody will be able to attend the course, and maybe some of us are in a different position. So, this is just a way for me to just show you the possibilities. And for those who would like to have more in-depth insights into how this is practically possible, please look at the ticker tape going underneath and just register for the courses and sign up as soon as possible. Now, in real life context, this is how it goes, and I'll try to do it very short, but just to give you an example. Now, you will notice I'm going to walk you through a very, very short version of how the strategic communications framework works in real life. In business setting, you start off with business goals. So assuming I'm comms manager, I'm working for one fast moving consumer goods business, and internal communications is under me, external communications is under me. Now, internal communications, rather organizational communication, let me use that word, has the internal communications piece and has the business communications piece. Let me not unpack that a bit. We can, for those coming into the course, you may hear that a bit more, but just keep that in mind. Maybe I can talk about that later in detail. But where you should start off from is this. Find out what the business is trying to achieve that year. What is the business goal for 2024 or 2025? What are we trying to achieve? What's the business agenda? What's the strategic agenda? Please find it out. Comms people, when you start off the year, you do not start building your plan on your table. You go and walk to your business leaders and find out what their agenda is, because you are working for them. I don't understand why people you are doing your communications on your own table. On your table. Are you the owner of the business? So you must start your comms plans from the communications, from the business objectives and agenda. When you understand what they are trying to achieve, that is when you can now develop the communications agenda or identify the communications opportunities within that space. In other words, what are the things that people need to know? How do we want people to feel about these changes that are coming up, or whatever it is we're doing? What will we need them to do? So that is about organizational communication. And do you know what I found out? Except you have a very fantastic CEO or a leader, if your corporate communications manager doesn't set this communications agenda to align with the business agenda from the beginning of the year, most of the time the leaders will not do it. The leaders will only remember communication as an afterthought when there is something important that they want to communicate, but they have not even set the scene for that communication. So when you have the business agenda, you then derive your communications agenda based on that, objectives and timelines. You think about the key players in that space. In other words, based on everything you want to achieve, how does this, for instance, if it's a manufacturing goal and everything, factory workers or field staff or production staff, you break all your staff into categories and you decide which of them need to be what's the information or the action level that I need, what are the things that we need them to know, what are the things that we need them to do, what are the things that we need them to just feel excited and engaged about, and then you build a strategy around that. That know, feel and do is a very important part of internal and organizational communications as a whole. A lot of the inspirational leaders focus on the feel, but it doesn't come naturally to every leader. When you think about that feel is how you now create that environment of inspiration and motivation to ensure that people, are able to walk along, and what you want them to do, they're able to do that. So you then build a strategy around that. You think about where and how am I going to, what's the schedule, what platforms am I going to use to get those messages across. For instance, if it's field staff, I need field staff to ramp up production in the year 2024. Then we'll know that even though we may have an engagement session where we're informing all staff, we then need to have targeted engagement with the field staff to ensure they understand what's required of them and what they're going to do. Now, we may decide the next thing is, what's the message? The message to all staff will be consistent, but there will be a tailored messaging to the people that I require action from. And then, who is the spokesperson? At the corporate level, I may use the manager or the MD, but at the level of the field, I may decide to use the field, the factory manager, the production manager, or whoever is best positioned to speak to them. So that's really how the structure goes. But you start off from, what does success look like for the business or the organization that is paying, that you are supporting? That is what drives your agenda. I see communications team carrying over plans from one year to the other. Oh, really? Whereas the business plan is changing, but your comms plan is not. How does that, do you understand? Does that really make sense? You are not doing strategic communication. You are just occupying space. So, yeah, that's what you're doing.
Thank you so much, FA. And I love that our participants are finding this session very engaging, and we've started having questions. And we have a question from Ejiro. He says he'll like you to speak about how impact is measured and the kind of data you have used in the past to inform decisions as a strategic communications professional expert, actually.
So yeah, Ejiro, thanks for that. So impact, if it's, for instance, if it's internal, if it's organizational, like I said, it's very easy. The important thing about measuring impact is that you must have determined what success is supposed to be from the beginning. I think that's the mistake. And that success is supposed to be determined between you and the business leader, not you on your own. Because if you determine success on your own, you are likely to come up with something that is not aligned with what the business or the organization is looking at. So there's likely to be that confusion at the end of the day when they say, we don't even know what they are doing, they're just making money, they're just a cost center and all of that. But if you've had a conversation with your business or organizational or institutional leader or public sector leader from the beginning, that what does success for this year 2024 look like, or 2025? Like I said, following the strategic communication framework, you will have looked for the people opportunities, the communications opportunities there, the information gaps, and built a strategy around it. Now, one of the reasons why I think it's very important to have this strategic communications theory thinking is because many of us, our brains are already locked into a certain way of working. It requires a paradigm shift. Now, I entered the profession as a public relations practitioner. By the time corporate communications became a thing around 2005, many of us were faced with a decision choice to either stay in that PR space or segue into comms. I thank the God that made me that I made the choice to segue into corporate communications, because and I entered it. I really entered it, and I was humble enough to start learning. As of that time, I had already been in practice for about 15 years before I started learning comms afresh. So, but I see that a lot of people think that they can just go through, like, jump it without going through that process. No, it's actually not possible. So the framework teaches you how to set your baseline. So why I think that a lot of people struggle with impact measurement, because they are thinking in terms of impressions, engagement. They are thinking, because PR used to struggle with impact. Comms does not struggle with impact, because if you follow the strategic communications framework, you would have determined what success looks like from the beginning. You will have known your baseline. In other words, before I started, for instance, let's say the staff come to work late. That would have been your baseline. You would have done the data and found out that, okay, we resume work at 7 a.m., but only 50% of our staff are on seats at that time. So you're now going to put in place a common, and then you look at the data and you see the people who are the greatest offenders are the people that work in this location or in that location or this kind of thing. So you will then build a communications plan targeted at those individuals. You will have messaging from management saying, we are going to be checking. You will put a structure in place, and then you will be monitoring, but you will be communicating. That's a very simple example. So you will have gotten all that data at the beginning. That then becomes your KPI. So by the time you now target, and you will have observed the behaviors of the workers, you will look at them and know how to engage them. If it's security men, it's field staff. If you're talking to field staff or security men, the messaging is different from if you're talking to white collar workers and senior leaders and managers. Yeah. So you will have tailored that messaging to the people. These are all the things that theory of communications teaches you. And I say this because I see that a lot of practitioners, you are taking a one-size-fits-all approach. This is why I'm saying it's a systematic approach, but you cannot apply it if you think that is something that people just do and couple anyhow. And that's why you're not getting the results that you would like to have. People are not seeing that value, that impact. Ejiro, I don't know if that's answering your question. So you have to, it's not, you don't, if you have not decided with your business leader what success looks like, you have not agreed the communications opportunities within that larger thing. Let me give another example. For instance, Dangote Refinery. This year, he's about to launch his refinery. That's the business agenda. The people in the community, then they'll do the stakeholder mapping and say, there's a lot of stakeholders in this space. So there's regulator, there's the general public, the people that buy fuel, the transporters, the marketers, the shipping people. They will do all of that stakeholder. What does success look like? Dangote will have told the staff what success looks like at the beginning of the year. The communications people, they go to work and they're beginning to develop a plan to make sure that that success that he wants to achieve, they achieve it for him on an organizational level. So the communications to the refinery, CEO is going to go out and say that PMS is going to be ready by the 15th of September. Whatever you do operationally, you must make sure that you hit that target. So do you understand what I'm saying? Communications should be embedded in the business.
Yeah.
So if you are doing your communication, there's a critical thing happening for the organization you work for that year, and your communication strategy is not showing it. You're talking to me about engagement and impression. Are you really part of that organization? Every other person is working towards that deadline. Contracting and procurement, shipping, logistics, finance, resourcing. HR is hiring the lead people that we need to get the job done for us. Communications, won't you find your space? So at the beginning, if we now, let's say ground zero, using that same Dangote experience, at the beginning, many Nigerians were not aware that this and that was going on. You can run, for instance, a media mentions analysis and see what the level of awareness or the media mention or the sentiment was about you before you started that campaign, and then run it and check it after, the impact of it. You could also have some specific targets about saying you want to advance a case to push the hand of or to encourage the regulator to do certain things. That then becomes a milestone. Communications is not the only player in that space. There are many people playing in that space. But if you were part of the development of the messaging and the strategy around that, when they are counting the success, your name will be mentioned. Do you understand what I'm saying? So strategic
Yeah.
communication teaches you to build a strategy and a plan around tangible business agenda and objectives. If you miss it in that phase at the beginning, you will struggle with KPI. That's when you'll be counting tweets, engagements, impression, and all
That's
those sort of
why.
things. I don't even know what you are busy counting that for. You are working, if you're working for a serious organization, whether it's business, institutional, even if it's a policy think tank. In fact, I think government is the one that fails in this, particularly in Nigeria. The level of the quality, the standard of communication, oh my goodness. Yeah, particularly in
I think this affirms to what Paul Liam has said in the comments. He said strategic communications is crucial but not accessible to everyone because of the obvious challenges highlighted by Shola. And particularly government across levels, as I have observed, lack adequate understanding of strategic communications, and we see this in crises and gaps they are contending with, and so forth. We also have another comment from Caleb who says that strategic communications theory aids in planning from the end to the beginning. So thank you so much. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your contributions. We are moving the conversation further with the next question. How does strategic communication work in a non-profit development or humanitarian context? And before SA just proceed to answer this question, I'd like to say again, like I said at the beginning, that feel free to share this video, this live session with your network. I mean, just do a repost, and so many people who need to see it will see it, because we need to, ensure that this conversation is getting to where it should get to. So yeah, I say please. The question is how, what's the real life context of strategic communications in a non-governmental sector? Thank you.
Yeah, so in the nonprofit sector, strategic communications, it's the same principles. I mean, like I said again, when you have the principles, you can apply it everywhere else. But there's a little bit of a nuance in the nonprofit space, or or particularly non-profit and humanitarian space. So you will still start up with the strategic goals. In this case, you're not talking business goals because you're not a business entity. So strategic goals, what's the agenda? For instance, let's assume polio, or was it monkeypox or whatever, or you want to increase, you want to raise more funding for the efforts this year. That's like, we are really struggling with funding and you want to get more involvement, more stakeholders, more volunteers. There's just an agenda. That's where you start. That's your starting point. You understand that. You understand the history of how you've been getting investors and everything before, or donors, and what's going to change and what you need to change, which areas you're looking more of. Is it more, am I looking for donors only within Nigeria or Africa or internationally? Because again, if you are looking for donors internationally, the comms strategy is completely different from if you are looking for donors locally. So again, I see that a lot of comms people, because you are not working according to the theory, you're just developing, you're just tweeting and posting. You don't even, whereas if you really wanted to get donors, if that's part of the strategic agenda, the whole strategy should be different. Even if you are targeting even within Africa, the strategy for West Africa is different from South Africa. Southern Africa is different from East. Oh, do you understand? Because it's a different ecosystem, different stakeholders, different beliefs, different culture, different ecosystem.
Yeah.
So what is the agenda? What are the objectives? Which audiences are you trying to reach? Who are the stakeholders that you need to engage? You do the mapping, you find out a lot about them. One of the things that strategic communications teaches you, theory, is you have to invest in learning about the people that you are communicating to, and you do not take them for granted, and that you use your knowledge of them to determine how you are going to engage to them. You do not treat them, you don't treat them like, I'm just force feeding you, you must take it whether you like it or not, which is how I see political public sector communication going. They just force feed you, take it, and then when the people now react, they're like, do you understand? No, yes, now, because, and then they talk to everybody the same way. They talk to everybody. They don't realize that there's Gen Z, there's millennials, there are university students, white collar students, middle class, artisans, farmers, fishermen. There's a whole
And there should be
segmentation.
different approaches. to them.
Exactly. The message should be the same, but the way the approach to engagement and the listening. People should hear in what you are saying, that you have
Yeah.
heard them and that you are taking action based on what they have said. Very, very important. It's important in business communication, important everywhere else. So back to non-profits. So with the difference with the non-profit and the humanitarian is that you also need, you would probably have a very strong influencing strategy. It's very likely that whatever thing you are doing, at some point you may need behavioral change, like if it's health or humanitarian action. Like for instance, now the flood in Maiduguri now, if you're involved in that flood, there are things that you need people to do. You need them to maybe move from certain areas to certain areas. There's a lot that you need to do. So the communications, you have to be able to understand the barriers that exist within those ecosystem that prevent people from doing certain things or make it easier. So don't just tell them to move if you don't already have messaging about how they are going to move to where they need to go. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
these are all the things that, so don't go out and just be saying things. So if you have a good strategic communication theoretical framework, you will make sure that you have gotten all of that data together before, and then that forms a part of the message to the people. So people can then take you seriously and say, oh, you are now supporting the agency to do what they want. And even if they are sending you out and say, okay, talk to these people, and you know that some of these things, there are some barriers that have not been taken away. In the non-profit space, you should raise it and say, this thing we're asking them to do is not implementable because they do not have access to, they cannot move. We would need to provide this, we would need to provide that. So you stress test the messaging, and then you make sure that all the enablers are in place, you put it in, and then you think carefully about the people who you're going to get to speak to the audiences or the people that you are engaging. Use community leaders when necessary. Use your own leaders to, if you think it will help the process. And cultural sensitivity and all of that. I mean, I don't want to mention a particular case, but there was some messaging that went out recently, even to do with the Maiduguri flood, and thoughts and prayers with the people who are impacted by that in Nigeria. We pray that a sense of normalcy will come soon, and that the kind of remedial action that should be taken will be taken well and and swiftly. But there was a messaging that came out, and I don't want to go into the specifics, but it was clear that it wasn't thought through, because there was a backlash to the messaging. And even when I read it, I was like, is this what is needed now? But somewhere somebody just thought it was a very good thing to say, well, because flood response, people are thinking about relocation, they're thinking about getting the water out, bringing people to safe places, the
Yeah.
sanitary conditions, water, health, and medicine. And then you come out with messaging that is saying something completely different. Again, that is because you do not have the strategic theory framework. You are not stress testing your messaging. You are not following the systematic approach to communication. You are just coming up, you are winging it. You're one of those people. I have a flair for communication. So you are using that flair to determine, do you understand how you should be communicating in crisis, even in humanitarian cases? So yeah. So anyway, but this particular case I'm talking about, it wasn't a humanitarian agency that made this. It was actually the government, a government messaging that went out in this case. So I think the humanitarian agencies generally are more sensitive. They are very culturally sensitive. They also need to use the behavioral change model,
Yeah.
which is an aspect of strategic communication that has its own system as well. Most humanitarian organizations are aware of that. If you are in development communications and you don't know about behavioral change communication, I have nothing to say. Please go to Google and check, because
Thank you so much, SK. And we have a question from Asma. You're asking if this forum is recorded. Yes, it is. So you can follow us. We're going to upload the recorded video on Sola Abulu and Associates YouTube channel. So please follow us on YouTube. You can also follow Sola Abulu and Associates here on LinkedIn, and of course follow Sola Abulu on LinkedIn too. The forum is going to be recorded, and you can help us pass the message across to those in the government affairs like you. Thank you so much. So, you have already dived into working in political sector and the government sector. So, I just wanted to shed more light, looking at the political public policy context and political communications context. How does strategic communications play a role, a very vital role in those contexts? Thank you so much.
So yes, thanks so much for that. I think it actually does play a long course. And the reason, one of the things why we're going this route is that I want to show everybody that strategic communications actually operates in every sector. It is valid in all sectors, in all spaces. It's about, do you know how to use it? That's the thing. So in the political and governance sector, like we said, you start again. How do we start again? Like I said, success parameters. What does success look like? Who do we engage? The political leader or the institutional leader or the governance leader, the public, whoever it is. If you are working in a ministry, you must engage with the minister and ask him or her, what does success look like for them this year? What are the things they are planning to do? What is their point A? What's the ground zero? And what are they looking to move on to? Get that agenda, get that calendar. Then start your stakeholder mapping. On our course on the 26th, we're going to be introducing everybody to the strategic communications framework and the stakeholder management framework, as well as the reputation management framework, and show you how you bring all three together in managing strategic communications. Like I said, there are many frameworks that go into this, and it's your ability, your knowledge of them that really determines. I see that failure, the two areas where I think people struggle a lot, particularly also in the political and government setting, is that they do not really think about what does success look like. Their vision of success is very narrow. So for many of them is satisfying only their political allies. They do not really think about the citizens or governance and that sort of thing. So strategic communication makes you think about success broadly, not just about your own allies, but generally about your reputation and the way in which you are perceived as a whole. So you get those success parameters, you decide who your key stakeholders and the audience are, you map them, you also determine who do you want them to, what do you want them to know, how do you want them to feel, and what do you want them to do. So for instance, I mean, there's a lot going on right now in Nigeria about how the economy is going and cost of living and all of that. And you would think that people managing communications will be focusing on knowledge, what they need Nigerians to know, and how they want Nigerians to feel. Nobody is paying attention to the feelings. Nobody. And you tell me you are not doing any, there's no strategic, in fact, there's nothing strategic. You're not paying attention to sentiment. You're not addressing it. So that know, feel, and do is a very important part. That should actually be paramount. If you notice, Kamala Harris is running a very intelligent campaign. She's using strategic communication textbook. Remove your sentiment. I know some of you may be Trump followers. If you understand strategic communication, and I'm telling you, if she continues like this, anyway, you will see. If they win, they are running strategic communications pro max. They are following the principles because what strategic communications theory does for you is that it doesn't have a one size fits all. It adapts to the situation as it finds it. It looks at the environment, it looks at the stakeholders, it knows where it's wanting to go, but it's helping you to navigate complexity. The theory also has complexity theory as one of the theories in it. So you think about the actions that you need to take, bearing in mind what success looks like. In Kamala Harris's case, sorry, I'm calling her, Kamala Harris. In Kamala Harris's case, or Cage, let me call her Cage. In Cage's case, she wants to get into the White House. So for her, she's mapping her audience in terms of who are the allies, who are the advocates, who is the middle ground, who are the antagonists. What do I want people, the American public, the voting public, to know, to feel, and to do? She's focusing a lot on the feel and the do. The do is go and register. The know that I am capable. On the debates that she did or whatever, people were not sure about whether she had what it takes to be commander-in-chief. She made sure her entire strategy was to leave you without any doubt that she can handle anybody, tough people, when it comes to doing that. She wanted you to live with that knowledge. She also wanted you to know that she has a plan. So the messaging was around the planning. She also wanted Americans to know that I am not only going to be the president of the Democrats, I am going to be the president of all Americans, which is why she made a lot of conciliatory statements targeted at things that other people from the other side will be interested in. So her messaging was inclusive. And the platform, of course, she made the best of that platform. And then the voice, which was her voice, and all of that. So the key performance indicator that she would have from that is, for instance, after that, how did voter registration go? What did people say? She raised 48 million after the debate within 24 hours. Is that a KPI or is that not a KPI? Please, can anybody tell me? And by the way, it was her comms team that prepped her. She was seriously prepped for that thing. A lot of people, her influencers and all of that. That's what we're saying. So strategic communications can always be tied. There is, if you are struggling with measurement, you are clearly not in that strategic communication space. So in the political setting, particularly, it is very, very important. Perhaps, but particularly in places where they go by the rules. When they don't go by the rules, it's a little bit difficult, but you can still play. You can still play to the extent that you can make yourself a very strong contender. You can make yourself somebody that has a national personality that people can relate with. You can use strategic communication to build your public profile, to build acceptability, to make people know what your agenda is, and also to get followership. So whether or not whatever it is they do when it comes to the elections, do you understand? You will still be, you
Yeah.
can make yourself a national figure to the point whereby you have, ultimately, do you understand, you have something to bargain with going forward. So, but again, it has to be purposeful, it has to be intentional, and it has to be audience centric. It has to be stakeholder management savvy. It has to be knowledge friendly. It has to be sentiment savvy. It has to be have a very strong call to action, and it must speak to people in the language that they understand. You are using fundamental concepts and principles to address a problem. You are not winging it. You are not going based on intuition. You are leaning on data. You are leaning on research. You are leaning on observation, and you are refining your approach as you go. That's the important thing about strategic communication. What do I notice about political communications in our environment? They are not learning. That is the one that tells
Quite
me that
unfortunate.
that is what tells me that you are not doing strategic communication, because the last, when you do ABCDF, all the steps of strategic communication, the end is when you now your measurement, your KPIs, your matrix, and then your improvement feedback. You respond.
Yeah.
If you see that one messaging did not hit the bat, you quickly correct, you change. If you see that you are losing one audience, you adapt, you learn, you listen. They're not listening, neither are they learning. That is, so the communications is not strategic at all. It is not. And for me, this is really instructive, because I want to see how countries like mine navigate this space. I want to see whether over time the government and the political systems will realize that they have no choice but to adopt the strategic mode of communication, and that the old school way of top-down, propaganda-driven, I say what I want to say, and because I'm government, you have to take it from me, that they will realize at that time is gone. But I want to see how long it's going to take. It's fascinating for me to observe. So, but let's see. And so it is an unfolding space for us. So I'm happily watching it. I hope that answers your
Thank
question a
you.
little.
Yes, yes, it does. Thank you, SA. And I just want to say that for those of you joining from Ghana, from Zambia, feel free to drop, feedback that relates to your own political scenes in your country. And like you can see clearly, there is a whole lot in strategic communication that we can't even unpack. I know that the session is titled "Unpacking the Theory and Practice of Strategic Communications," and we're yet to scratch the surface. And so that means that's instructive to you that if you have not registered for the course that's coming up, you should, register for the course. And of course, I'll pity you if you're not taking down notes, actually, because this is as robust can be. So, SA, you have already spoken on from following the question that Ejiru had earlier asked. You threw some light on how to measure impact in strategic communications and the business and organizational terms. But you may want to further extend that if you want. But I'll just also add this question as a follow-up question so that we make very good use of time. And so the question is, so if you were to pitch the importance of strategic communications to a board or a management team, what would you say? And this is the time where you have to pay very good attention for those of us watching, so that you know how to pitch the importance of strategic communications to your management team. Thank you. Let's go ahead.
So, if I was to pitch it to my team, first of all, I would say that strategic communications is the critical enabler and the bridge between existing and excelling in your sector. It's really about where you want to go in your business. For me, that's it. If you are comfortable where you are and you do not intend to be a national or a global player or an international player, then perhaps you may not need strategic communication. Although I wonder how that is possible in today's world. But for you to become what you can call a leader of a sector, of a market, to be a reference point at whatever level you are, you need strategic communication. And in today's world, one thing that I have learned is that you do not wait until when you hone your brand voice and you prepare in peacetime for the day you will need that brand voice in wartime. A typical example for us, I mean, I've already given the example of a Dangote who used all of his brand power, you know what I mean, and his voice when he needed it this year. Another example is the landmark Nigeria, and apologies to my non-Nigerians because I'm giving Nigerian examples here, but well, I've used Kamala, so at least that's one example that is outside of Nigeria. Another example was something that happened recently, landmark Nigeria, the demolition of the beach, which happened, a Nigerian entrepreneur that happened to. He was somebody that he's sort of well known and communicates out and has a very strong personality in terms of brand and communications. And he was able to manage. I think he managed that situation excellently. And to a very large extent, he was able to leverage on communications to tell his own story, and he managed that crisis very well. So for me, if you will not use strategic communications to make your organization more productive, more profitable, build a culture for itself, make your brand more visible, or make you yourself a market leader, you had better use strategic communication to manage issues and protect your reputation and be crisis ready and resilient. And the thing about crisis, it doesn't give warning. So you cannot tell when your day of judgment or your day of tribulation will come. And if that is when you now start running around helter-skelter, you have not honed your brand voice. You have not developed your communications messaging. You do not have a structure. You don't even understand what the strategic management of communication or how to manage situations through purposeful communication. You have no idea what that looks like. You will struggle. And I put it to you that you are a local champion and you will continue to remain a local champion. So if you are comfortable with that, which is not bad, by the way, if you are comfortable with that, then by all means, stay there. I personally think, even individuals these days, you are seeing a lot of cases of individuals having to come out and speak out about things and clarify things, and all that. On social media, maybe something happened, it's becoming more, that whole thing of, I don't communicate, or I am not being external, I don't have a voice, I don't, it's just, there's no place for it in our world anymore, where everybody is armed with a smartphone. Everybody. All it takes is somebody to post something about you that is false, and you're going to spend
and your voice comes alive.
the next 24 hours you will be living a nightmare. You had better be prepared. So that's even in terms of the external risk. But I'm saying the internal opportunities of making yourself a more effective organization, it can only happen by having a very strategic and purposeful, intentional approach to communication. Even more so now that we're in a very vocal and uncertain world, where really you need your organization to be working effectively. You need your staff, employees, everybody to be on side. That rallying together, that rallying cry needs to happen. So yeah, that is it. And one thing I will say, there is no successful market leading global company that does not do strategic communication. So it is a company of the successful. So a choice to ignore strategic communication is a choice to be outside of the circle of the most successful companies and organizations on the planet.
Thank you so much. That was very profound. As we begin to wrap it up, we actually have Ejiro, who is, I like to say that he's arguing the political communication scene in Nigeria. And he says that the challenge in political communications in Nigeria is not necessarily the communicators. Communicators in the space are always doing damage control. Irrational policies are being made randomly by politicians, and communicators struggle to justify them. So yeah. So in his comments,
yes, I need to respond to that. So Ejiro, you may know of some people who perhaps this is the case, but the body language, I have been in this practice for over 30 years. There's some of those messaging, you cannot get me to issue that kind of messaging. I'm sorry. Of course, which is why I will not be in that space in the first place. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I have it. Do you understand? And for me, and this is a very good question, because this is where ethics comes into play. Professional ethics, as well as your own personal character ethics. I believe very strongly. You know that school of thought that says that politics, you have to lie to get ahead? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. It's a choice you have made. That whole propaganda, people have built a whole profession around propaganda. I am here to tell you that that is not the only way to do politics. And I'm not speaking out of theory, because I have supported people in the political communication space as well. It's a choice. It's a strategic choice. Do you understand? You have strategically chosen to use propaganda as your knee-jerk reaction. Now, to those communicators, if we did not have communicators willing to play that game, do you think those politicians will continue? Most of the time. And where I may agree with you, in fact, I don't. It's a choice. Because even in the government, you see that some are more aggressive, negatively aggressive than others. So why? Why are we blaming the politicians? Not all of them are, some are as in real aggressive, negatively aggressive. You find out, and this is where, like I said, as professional practitioners, you need to know that your reputation is on the line when you do this kind of things in a public role. Now, why do we know the names of all the spokespersons? And if you ask every Nigeria, there's a hierarchy according to the most distasteful ones and the ones that are better. Why? Because the people that say the most aggravating things, there are some that are known for saying the most aggravating thing. You cannot tell me it's the politician telling them to do that. And I don't want to share, because a lot of the work that I do is confidential. But sometimes what I do is, you come to me with a brief. For the few times, and many times I don't do, I've done only pro bono for in public sector spaces, because I'm very careful with that category of stakeholders. So I work more extensively in the private sector and the NGO development sector. With public sector, political, I'm very careful, particularly in the political sector. But in the few times that I've had the opportunity to advice in those spaces, when they tell me what they want to achieve, I will tell them how I think they can do it. It's outcome we're looking at now. Leave the strategy to me. Do you understand? So, but what is
Yeah.
happening here is that you are allowing the politicians to dictate the tone and the language of the messaging. And guess what? It's not working. Look at it now. Look at the results. Is it working? It's not working for them now. Please, Uchibeno, is it working? It's not working.
Not at
And
all.
again,
It isn't.
it's not working. As in, it's not. It's not working. It's a complete failure. Now, if you were a strategic communications person, you will go back to your principal and say, "Oga, you see, that time when we did it, see how we did not," and you will carry the data to show him or her. I do not know the leader that does. There's no leader that doesn't want to be liked. You're not playing to their ego well enough. And the point is that most of these people, they really don't know what to do. I'm telling you. Because they are still practicing the old way. It's not going to work. And I'm telling you, as we move more into this 2024, as we move into 2025 to 2030 onwards, we're going to see a lot of this collapsing. It's the same problem that, I think this is the same problem that Donald Trump and his team are having. The old school propaganda, fake news, misinformation approach that worked very well for them in the last election is not working with this particular campaign. It would have worked if Biden remained the candidate, because Biden himself was a candidate that was struggling. But with this team that his opponent has assembled, is not working. Because they are doing strategic communications 101. So they are doing the misinformation. They're not even penetrating. As in, their messaging is staying only on their side, on their lane. Rather, some people are even moving from their lane to the middle ground. So abeg Ejiro, I seriously I have a different view on that regard. I cannot exonerate the practitioners. It's a very good question you raised. People always tell me, "Oh, Shola is," because even in private sector, I had colleagues. One thing that I'm known for, they say Shola speaks her mind. Even in business sector, many of my colleagues, many people that I knew will never speak their mind. They'll be doing yes man to Oga. If you cannot speak the truth to your boss, you are in the wrong profession. Please go and do something else. Go and learn another work. How do you understand? It's not just that kind of work. You have to be. Imagine if you are. You have to be able to tell somebody, your boss did a speech, or that speech did not fly. It didn't go well. You have to tell him or her. And if you are unable to, sorry, you are in the wrong profession. And like I said, that tension, that courage is required, whether you are in business. I have seen it even in business setting. People are afraid to tell their bosses that, or even sometimes tell them, oh God, this message, you're not the best person to pass it. Let somebody else do it. A strategic communications person, these are messages you should be able to pass across. So I'll just leave it at that. Ejiro, I don't
Thank
know
you
if
so
you are
much. Yeah, I hope this was helpful, Adjure.
right now. If you have any last questions, please just drop them and I'll answer them in the chat
Yeah,
afterwards, because
yeah,
I'm really out of
yes,
time now.
we're
I don't
running
want to
out
be
of
taking
time.
time for granted.
Thank you so much, and I hope that was helpful to you, Ejiro. I mean, like SA said, it's really a matter of ethics in in practicing. Someone says, I totally agree with you, Ma. We totally need to be ethical providing our services. Yes, so we need to be very ethical in providing our services as communications practitioners. Thank you so much, and this was very insightful. Thank you to everyone who joined. And finally, we'll just take this last question. We see that, I mean, 1 hour wasn't even enough to unpack the basics of strategic communication. So if these are just the basics, the basic concepts and principles, then what I want you to just show light on what participants in your course will expect, your upcoming strategic communications course. What are they going to expect in the sessions?
So you're going to expect that you would have, first of all, we're going to be having 6 modules. We're going to be talking about we introduce the strategic communication framework, which I've talked a lot about today already. Then we talk about the stakeholder management framework, which I haven't talked so much about, I've alluded to, but we'll go into detail into that, show you how that comes together, talk a bit about reputation. We have a piece on internal communication, which a module on internal communication, I think that's the second module. We do that because if we have corporate communications people in the room, or sometimes even organizational communications or non-profit people, it's important that they know how they can build up system within their organization. You need to have a structure, standards, policies, and processes, and all of that. So we do a little bit of a deep dive into that. In the last session cohort that we had, there were a lot of people in the room that found that module very beneficial, and I was happy that finally, because most of the time internal comms is what people tend to sort of like overlook. And then we then go into I think the KPI session, and the measurements, the impacts, and best practices, and that sort of thing. So we have a simulation session as well, live case studies where we actually go into breakout groups. We have a sort of like communications or a business problem or organizational problem, and we ask people to really take it, come up with how they're going to build a strategy around it, using this entire framework. So we do the theory and we also do a simulated practice of it. And like I said to people, I had to go into a classroom as well at the beginning of my journey into strategic communications to learn the fundamentals. What you're getting from me right now, by the special grace of God, is not only the theory, but the practical experience that I have built since then, which is about 15 plus years. I put the PR comms together, is 30 plus experience. That is what you're getting when you come into those rooms. And after the sessions, we also have group coaching sessions, which we do on request by the cohorts. But it's an opportunity to learn from the concepts and principles, as well as to learn from others on the call. Typically corporate comms people, business comms people, development comms people, they come in there. So if you're someone that you're struggling in your current role, you have communications in your title, either as specialist or whatever, or you have communications as a mandate for you, and you do not know what the strategic communications framework is. You also do not know what the stakeholder management framework is. You have no idea what it means to manage reputation using concepts and principles. Then you have to find a way to get that learning. We can provide it. If you're able to join the session on the September 26th, that's fine. If not, please find some other way to close the gap for yourselves. And so I hope this has been helpful. I'd like to see your feedback in the comments. Give us a thumbs up, an emoji. And yes, so we'll see you on the next live. We do one every month. And next month will be issues and crisis management. So stay tuned. Back to you, Tibe. Eno.
Thank you so much, SA, for such an amazing and insightful session. Every time when we begin, we promise that we're going to have an interactive session. We're going to have a very educating session. And I'm always very excited to see through to the end that we deliver on that promise. Thank you to everyone who joined us from Lagos, from Abuja, from Gambia, from Zambia, and to all of you who did not, mention where you're joining from. We love that you participated. Yes, how's it going again? We love that you participated in the session, and we are glad. Oh, we still have comments coming in, so we'll be right in in the comment section. Esther will be in the comment section and she'll be answering your questions just so that we can keep the time. And of course, you can come back you can follow us on social media on LinkedIn, Sola Abulu and Associates. You can also share this across to your friends, family, and as well, you just stay tuned and follow us, subscribe to our YouTube channel. The recorded session is going to be there on YouTube. So this is very good for you because you can share the recorded session with your management team or, that person who you think really needs to see this and who was unable to join the session. So like Essay has said, till next month, where we unpack, another topic on issues and crisis management. We loved having you here and we hope to have you again. Stay tuned. Thank you so much and bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much. Thanks, Itibedo. So see you all soon.